Is infantry spam the answer to playing Tempest Rising in PvP? Well, it seems to be for some players, as I tried it out for myself to be able to talk about it and show you the results. So here are two matches of almost pure infantry spam in Dynasty vs GDF match and a Dynasty mirror match, which is particularly interesting because the opposing player had the same idea. Let's watch these together, talk about it in the comments, and I will also show you one more unexpected infantry spam tactic at the end of the video. So why do Tempest Rising players who use the Tempest Dynasty faction even go for these kinds of infantry spams? In my experience, and by what I have read from other players, it is because it is the simplest tool available to deal with the GDF's incredible advantage in the early game due to their overly effective combo of Sentinels and drone operators, which can be produced at an astonishing rate and melt any unit the Dynasty has available to produce at the start of the match. That is why in this match I don't produce engineers or Havocs, even if the Havoc Rush is a very powerful tool, something I will show you in the next video, but I go for Dynasty Guards. You can tell right away if you're up against a GDF player, since they will capture neutral buildings on your side of the map because of the asymmetrical nature of the factions and the fact that they can produce and send out basic infantry units much sooner than you as the Dynasty faction. So I pivot to the other side of the map and start producing missile troopers, because I know I will need them against the GDF Sentinels. I can also produce them later, as they have the dash ability to run faster for a time and can catch up to the guards, who are needed to fight against the GDF field scouts anyway. What is happening right now is that because of their early infantry advantage, the GDF player is already ahead in both power and resources, as he can not only capture his Tempest processing centers, but also deny me the chance to capture my own at my side of the map. This much faction asymmetry out of the gate wouldn't be such a big issue were the maps and neutral buildings not designed in such a way that they grant the faction which can capture them such large benefits. This is exactly why I know I have to use my early infantry to destroy the Tempest processing centers my opponent has certainly captured by now on his side of the map, and by doing so he had to invest resources into engineers, which will keep his army underpowered for this short time before he uses the gain advantage to its full potential. If he has also relied on the power produced by these Tempest processing centers, I will be cutting his power supply by more than 50%, potentially turning off his buildings and turrets if he has any. This kind of an attack on the opponent's side of the map does create a problem with supply lines and bringing fresh troops, which is exactly why such infantry spam tactics only tend to work on the smallest of maps in Tempest Rising. You can see that enemy units were coming at me from multiple directions on the map, which is because he already had field scouts at every neutral building, denying my engineers access. This is one of the main reasons Dynasty players simply stopped bothering with engineers, because they are an instant loss, as not only do they arrive late, but if you invested money into them and gained nothing, you basically lose the match in the first 2 minutes. And what other units can Dynasty players produce in the first few minutes of a match? Dynasty Guard, Missile Trooper and the Havoc. Which is why playing with the Dynasty is quickly evolving into infantry spam or Havoc spam as the only effective openers on most maps. There are some other tactics you can try, but unless you're a very skilled and very fast player, you won't be able to pull it off. Now, with 2 barracks producing just 2 types of units, we are officially in a spam tactic, something I personally dislike as much as overly powerful rush tactics, as I don't find RTS games which have content worth 20 minutes but ending in under 5 minutes enjoyable. And I firmly believe it is detrimental to the RTS audience at large because it reduces player satisfaction, and it isn't something I am making up, it is what thousands of players told me or wrote about online. Naturally, very good and skillful players will tell you that minimal match length shows off player skill, but my question is, who are you going to show that skill to when 99% of the player base stops playing due to not having any satisfaction in playing? Anyway, after reaching the opponent's base, we could watch the currently bugged attack power of the marking rounds for the Sentinel, which do area of effect damage to clumped up infantry, which due to a lack of scatter command and their AI designed to clump up, produce the perfect target for this bugged attack type to work. Any experienced player knows this is the end of this match, and by the time I deal with the other part of this player's base, you can see in the chat exactly what I have been trying to explain to you. Players do not get satisfaction playing against spam armies. Now on to the Dynasty mirror matchup. The start is similar, but seeing no GDF field scouts at neutral buildings is a clear sign it is a Dynasty mirror match, so I actually do manage to capture some neutral buildings with engineers. It takes 4 minutes for the first contact with the enemy, which is wild when compared to the previous match, which was decided by the 5th minute. Here I am spamming infantry out of 3 barracks because I have enough power and resources thanks to the Tempest Processing Center. Getting specialists to help out with the infantry spam is a key component for a prolonged match with these tactics. I like to utilize different specialists as that increases my own playing satisfaction, but certain tactics require you to use 3 mechanists or 3 operatives. Map control on my end was almost full in this match, something I can't even dream against a GDF opponent. Now comes the fun part, as my opponent was planning on doing what most skillful players advise right now for the Dynasty faction. Early infantry spam using the Mechanist specialist and missile troopers with a turtle tactic until you can transition into levelers and dragonflies. For me, it is too binary and lacks fun if all outcomes are predetermined due to the GDF's overly powerful combo I have talked about before and the Dynasty's weak vehicles. Since I knew my opponent had the high ground because he turtled up and his supply lines for recruitment of new units were 0 as I was attacking his base, I backed off here, letting my map control and higher economy income do their work for me. Naturally, I had to press him at least a bit or he would burst out of his base and attack me where I didn't want to be attacked. This is when I could clearly see the Mechanist specialist in his army, and you can see just how effective they are at killing infantry units. Now that my opponent saw his chance to push out from his base and come to the middle of the map to fight, the battle could begin in earnest and we would be more equally matched. Since I felt the power of the Mechanist specialist in that first skirmish, I decided to focus fire on them and remove them from the fight first. Losing them and seeing his army dwindle in numbers, my opponent pulled back, but I didn't let up until I killed his specialist, while my map control and higher income allowed me to start adding vehicles and air units to my army. The tactic of setting up a strong forward base with a neutral building for vehicle repair and a field infirmary support power come in handy at this point, and this is something I dedicated my last video to explaining. Link is up here as a card and down in the description. Having a forward base at which you can repair and heal up while keeping the pressure on the opponent is a very useful Dynasty tool. By this time I had 5 barracks constantly producing units, more than a dozen harvesting rigs I was struggling to actually control, and just 2 machine shops. Not defeating my opponent past the 10-minute mark just leaves me open to a leveler and dragonfly combo, which would be lethal to this infantry blob I have almost no fine control over. This is why I knew I must end this match now. The final battle is something else, so I will just let you watch it. So now there is just one more interesting infantry spam that I have for you. It happened on one of the medium-sized maps, which is why my opponent opened up with a Havoc rush, coming to my base with 5 Havocs at just past the 3-minute mark. This was both a shock and an eye-opener to me about how effective this tactic is, but it also puts you on an economy path that becomes very problematic unless you deal enough damage to make it worthwhile. Luckily for me, he didn't use the Tempest Dynamos this unit can use if the Marshall Plan is used at the Dynasty Command Center, so his firepower was half of what it could be. As I said, I will go into the details of the Havoc spam and tactics in my future video. What I had was my spam of Igniter Corp unit, which proved quite resilient to the Havoc's attack. So while my opponent was busy destroying my Harvester rigs at my base, a handful of my Igniter Corp were on their way to his base. The trick here is that buildings have no armor resistance to fire weapon attacks, while they do have 25% armor resistance to the rocket attack of the Havoc. So while I might have lost most of my rigs, my opponent was going to lose his command center by the 5th minute. There really is no coming back from this, and in a few more minutes the match ends. I hope you learned a lot from these 3 matches, and I welcome your comments on these tactics. Thank you for watching and happy gaming.